15 Viking myths. Number 15. The Vikings weren't crafty. The Vikings were actually very talented in various areas, such as shipbuilding, carpentry, jeweler, and blacksmithing. The Vikings built the best ships during the Viking Age, which is the main reasons that they were able to travel so far and wide in a very short time. Some absolutely amazing jewelry has been found all over Scandinavia and former Viking settlements, like this little thumb-sized Valkyrie figurine, which is made of gilded silver. It was found in Horby, Denmark. Number 14. The Vikings were giants. The Vikings was around 8 to 10 centimeters shorter than we are today. The skeletons that the archaeologist has found reveals that the men was around 172 centimeters tall, and the women was around 160 centimeters tall. Number 13. They were all blonde. Genetic studies has proven that the majority of the Vikings in West Scandinavia, and therefore Denmark, was red-haired. In the northeastern Scandinavia, around Stockholm, it was mostly blonde hair that was dominant. Number 12. Women went on raids. The majority of the fighters that went on Viking raids were men, and a very tiny percentage were women. These female warriors was called Skjalmaidens, or in Old Norse, Skjalmø. In reality, the majority of the women's life revolved around the home and the farm in the Viking Age. When the men went away for raids or trade, the women did not just have the responsibility of the household, but also of the harvest, and therefore the survival of the family. Number 11. Women had no rights. Written sources present Viking women as independent and having more rights and freedoms than any other women anywhere else in the Viking Age. The women had, for instance, the right to a divorce if the man became violent towards her, but also the right to get married again. Women in the Viking Age had the freedom to become rich and powerful. The most valuable burial that has ever been found was the Osberg in Norway. It was of a woman who was either a noble or a queen. Number 10. They were called Vikings. While most people would stay in their villages for all their lives, some people was very adventurous during the Viking Age and would go Viking. The word Viking was a verb used to describe when someone went on a raid. Some of these raids would last months or even years, which made some people both rich and famous. Number 9. The Vikings were dirty and smelled badly. The Vikings were in fact very clean and took good care of their personal hygiene. The day Saturday in Old Norse was called Laugardag, which means washing day. Although the word has lost its original meaning in most Scandinavian languages, the word laug does still mean bath or pool in Icelandic, and the word daugar means day. I'm not Icelandic, so please excuse me if I don't pronounce them right. The Vikings actually had their own little hygiene set, which would include items such as an ear spoon, a comb, or even a razor. Number 8. The Vikings drank from skulls. The myth goes back to Runar Sav Danica Literatura Antiquissima by Ole Worm, that was published in 1636 and reprinted in 1651. Here you will find the phrase saying that the Danes drank from curved branches of skulls. This was translated into Latin as ex cranice orunde guasse cetederun, which means from the skulls of those whom they had slain. Number 7. Vikings' preferred weapon was an axe. It is true that the Vikings used axes in battle, but the most common weapons that has been found in Viking dig sites are spears. The Vikings also used knives, swords, round shields, bows and arrows. Number 6. The Vikings used primitive weapons. The Vikings are often shown with primitive weapons such as axes and spears, but the Vikings had actually very skilled weaponsmiths. They used a method called pattern welding, where the Vikings could make swords that were both extremely sharp and flexible. The most rare and exceptional weapon made by the Vikings was the sword Ulfberg. The sword was such a high quality sword that all attempts to make a replica in modern day by using the method the Vikings did has failed. Number 5. The Vikings only lived in Scandinavia. The Vikings did come from Scandinavian countries, which today is called Denmark, Norway and Sweden. But with a lack of fertile land and growing populations, the Vikings started to explore and create new settlements in many places throughout Europe, even as far away as Newfoundland in North America. Number 4. The Vikings were a nation. The Vikings were not one nation, but many small different groups of people, led by their own chieftain. Neither Norway, Denmark or Sweden was even a kingdom before the end of the Viking Age. Some of these small kingdoms did however work together when they went on big raids in foreign lands. Number 3. The Vikings were barbarians. Many books and movies depict the Vikings as some bloodthirsty barbarians that only seek to kill and destroy. While the Viking raids was indeed very violent, it is important to remember it was a violent age. But was the Viking armies really more violent than the non-Viking armies? If we take a look at Charlemagne, who was the king of the Franks in the Viking Age, he ordered the beheading of 4,500 Saxons in Verden. It does seem that the Vikings loved to destroy items of religious value, such as Christian monasteries and holy sites. They even killed the monks, which earned them quite a bit of hatred. The Vikings probably enjoyed the reputation they had. People were so scared of the Vikings that they would often flee from the cities instead of defending them when they saw a Viking ship coming near the shore. Number 2. The Vikings only pillaged, raped and murdered. Even though the Vikings did raid plenty of cities throughout Europe, including their own neighbors, it was actually only a very small percentage that were warriors. The majority of the Vikings was farmers, traders, craftsmen and merchants. For the Vikings that did set sail to explore new lands for riches and fame, it was not just in search of silver and women. Many Vikings settled more or less peacefully in areas such as England and France, but also in new and unexplored lands like Iceland and Greenland. The Vikings also loved to explore for new trade routes and traded with almost every country of the then known world and in the search for new lands. The Vikings even crossed the Atlantic and reached America 500 years before Christopher Columbus. Number 1. Did the Vikings wear helmets with horns? This is probably the biggest myth of them all. There are simply no records of Vikings having ever had helmets with horns, and there are no evidence that such Viking helmets having ever existed. All depictions of Viking helmets in the Viking Age show helmets with no horns, and the only authentic Viking helmet that has ever been found does not have them either. So where did this myth about the Viking horned helmets come from? An explanation could be that the Christians in Europe during the Viking Age added this detail to make the Vikings look even more like a wild barbarian by adding the horns of the devil on the head. It should be said that the god Odin wears a helmet with wings on it, which may look somewhere similar to horns. Another explanation is that the Viking helmet with horns myth is from the 19th century, when the Swede named Gustav Malmström, who was an artist, published his illustrations in a book called Fridtjof Saga, which is a 14th century Icelandic saga. In the 1870s, when Wagner staged his Der Ring der Nibelungen opera cycle, the costume designer Carl Emil Doppler created horned Viking helmets for the characters. There will probably be some of you out there that say, well, I'm sure I have seen Viking helmets with horns somewhere. And you are somewhat right. There have been found helmets with horns, but they are from the Bronze Age and not Viking Age. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It shows other people that you recommend this video for them. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe for plenty more content about Viking culture and their religion. See you next time. Thank you for watching.